Whoa, hey there. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Whoops. So, hey, it's Tuesday. It's kind of like a Monday for me right now, which is obvious. Welcome to the show. Got a good show for you guys, regardless of what you just saw there. We actually a lot of great stories here, including the Democrats' reaction, or at least one Democrat's reaction to the recent deal in the Senate, keep the government open. That's fascinating. Then we've got an unsurprising threat against CNN. We're going to go into a couple of stories related to that. And then we've got Donald Trump basically ruining solar. Wonderful. We also have news on John Kelly, as well as the Donald Trump's drug appointee, right? This is a fantastic story. And fantastic as in extremely entertaining, but when it comes down to it, pretty disastrous for the government, especially for people who actually might benefit from, I don't know, doing something about the opioid crisis. So we've got that. We also have Tony Perkins. So that's another great story. So we're going to start out, though, with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Yeah, I know. That's somebody that we really love here on this show. That's one of our favorite people. So we're going to get right into that. But before we do, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. Technical issues aside, I'm glad to have you all here. Our Facebook feed is also down, by the way. I'm not sure what the hell is going on with our Facebook live stream, but so we're not doing a live stream on Facebook. So today, again, thank you guys for being here, showing up. If you could please give us a like and a share. And I want to thank, of course, the patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation, for making sure that the show can go on. We rely on you guys to keep us going. So I want to give a thanks to everybody who donates to that. And if you want to become a patron, it's pretty easy to do. So, and support the show. All right. Anyway, let's start out. Let's get into the stories and go from there. Okay. That is not the right one. We're going to start out with this one. So Democrats are actually pretty terrible negotiators. We saw that yesterday when they ended the government shutdown based on nothing more than Mitch McConnell's word. So he's like, oh, yeah. Well, we'll definitely consider doing a vote for the Dreamers. You know the deal that they made? The Democrats pretty much got nothing other than chip funding, which is actually fairly significant. That is the only good thing to actually come out of this deal. Chip funding, but nonetheless, chip was incredibly popular among both parties. The Republicans holding it hostage, and they've been holding it hostage since September. So when they refused to fund it, like I reported on this back then, right? Hey guys, chip's running out of money. Maybe we should actually allocate some funding to it. And the Republicans are like, no, but you don't understand. We want to hold it hostage. We're going to hold this program hostage so that we can use it in order to fund Donald Trump's wall. So guess what? Unfortunately, that was successful. That was one of the bargaining chips that the Republicans used against Democrats. Hey, don't you care about health insurance funding for children? Yeah, of course I do. Don't you? Well, no. We only care because it's used as a political prop. We don't actually care about children. So that's, of course, the Republicans. So now, like I said, Schumer, the rest of the Democrats, or I should say most of the Democrats, there are some that didn't actually sign on to this. It was 81-18. was the total vote yesterday. Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, some others, Elizabeth Warren, said, you know what, we're not going to vote for this piece of crap because we get nothing for it, and it basically invalidates the entire reason that we shut down the government. Now, that's an important point to note because there's a CNN host, Ashley Banfield. Or, I'm sorry, no, not Ashley Banfield. It's Baldwin, actually, on CNN, the CNN host, asks Debbie Wasserman Schultz, hey, like, what did you actually get from this whole shutdown? Was it even worth it? In fact, I want to show you that video. Let's take a look.
What one thing can you point out that the Democrats, that Leader Schumer, what one thing did he get, you know, from Republicans to justify shutting down the government in the first place?
So the one thing I would say that he did get is the potential for momentum. Because if, and I'm certainly hopeful that that's what occurs, but if the majority leader, Mr. McConnell, can be taken at his word, and over the next 3 weeks before February 8th, they can negotiate on protecting the Dreamers, on making sure that we can have a full year comprehensive budget that lifts the caps and really makes sure that we can responsibly budget again, then maybe we can be in a position to get the House and the President to come on board.
Okay. So notice the framing there, right? Well, what did you get to justify shutting down the government? So admittedly, I'm not as comfortable with the framing, right? Because that casts, of course, the blame on the Democrats. But actually, again, as I explained earlier, Donald Trump refused to fund DACA, right? And also the Republicans refused to fund CHIP. So these different programs, Democrats are like, hey, wait a minute, this is supposed to be important to us. They've proven that it's really not important to them by them caving. But they claim, hey, man, these are important programs, so work with us. Donald Trump said, no, wall. I want a wall. I want billions of dollars to be wasted on the southern border. We want more military spending. We want all these things. We want more tax cuts, which, by the way, this agreement also authorizes $31 billion in tax cuts related to the health care law. So that's more stuff that they get. So, again, Democrats got completely hosed on this deal. But don't worry. You've got momentum. No, actually, you know what? Look, it's a waste of time, right? So here's the thing. Democrats, while they didn't cause the shutdown, they were ultimately, I guess, responsible for keeping the shutdown going, right? And as far as standing for their principles, okay? So the fact that they did not stand for their principles, the fact that they did bow down, the fact that they did not stand strong or get any sort of deal on Dreamers or anything else, more domestic spending, things like that, well then, again, colossal waste of time. I mean, do you think that Mitch McConnell's actually going to keep his word? No, absolutely not. In fact, Representative Steve Scalise said, hey, man, look, we didn't agree with that. Mitch McConnell doesn't speak for us. And actually later on in the interview, Wasserman Schultz is like, well, no, we don't actually think that they're going to do anything. I'm a House Democrat. I'm not a Senate Democrat. I mean, I don't know. We don't have that deal over here. Well, then why did the rest of the Democrats take it? If they knew that the House, and they did, wasn't actually going to take up this piece of legislation, this deal, then why the hell do it? Again, Democrats are the worst negotiators, right? Oh, but don't worry. Again, Democrats have the potential for momentum. So now, if this sounds crazy to you, then you would be correct. And here's Brooke Baldwin responding to this being like, wait a minute, momentum? What? Here, let me show you the video.
I'm still hung up, though, and I know Americans are listening, and they heard you say, and it's reverberating, potential for momentum, and they're thinking, potential for momentum, was that really worth shutting the government down for? The potential for something.
I will tell you that Republicans should be asking themselves that question because they shut the government down. This is a Trump shutdown, Brooke. They control the White House, the House, and the Senate. They have the full ability to have passed a budget, done whatever they wanted, and they couldn't because they know that the way they are trying to approach funding the government is irresponsible, and they couldn't even get all of their own members to vote for it. There is a potential for momentum if they are able to reach agreement on making sure that we can have a comprehensive budget deal, get our disaster relief passed to protect the communities that have been devastated by natural disasters, make sure we responsibly fund our military, our community health centers, and children's health insurance, and our dreamers. And then eventually, hopefully, we can get some agreement from the House and the President.
You're not getting any of that. You know why Republicans aren't asking that question? Because they won. You handed them, not Debbie specifically, she had nothing to do with that vote. She's not in the Senate, as I explained. But some Democrats had just handed them a victory and said, well, here you go. Here's everything that you wanted, with no guarantee that the House is actually going to take up a DACA bill. Remember, look, she's right that Donald Trump did start this shutdown by, again, demanding that Democrats fund the wall and give billions dollars, over $50 billion more to the military. And Democrats, by caving to a 3-week extension, when you look at the politics of it, they've actually weakened their position. So when they start negotiating again on the other budgetary issues, Republicans will hold the advantage. So guess what we're doing? We're going to pay for the wall. You goddamn guarantee we're going to pay for the wall. Again, they weakened their position. And look, there were Democrats earlier during the shutdown. I believe it's Luis Gutierrez, right? He's like, I will fund Trump's wall if you give us DACA protections. He said it. He's like, yes, I will give Trump money for that fucking wall. He didn't say that. I'm saying fucking wall. If we get something from the Republicans. But you held all the advantages. You held the advantages in the polling. You held the advantages on everything. Look, most people don't actually want the wall. I think there's, what, 30% for support for the wall? Whereas on DACA protections and an eventual pathway to citizenship, 70 to 80% of Americans want protections for the Dreamers. But see, look, the Democrats don't actually care about them, right? No, what they care about, and I explained this in another video, they care about the markets. What happens when the government shuts down? The markets go bad. The markets go down. And their donors are like, no, you can't let the markets go down at all. We're getting rich off these markets, these Trump-inspired markets. So, look, whatever you do, end the shutdown. That's it. We're going to let you pull off this publicity stunt for maybe a day or two, but that's it. Fold. Like, we tell you to fold, you fold. And Chuck Schumer is like, I fold. I fold. But you got nothing for it. Nothing. That promise from Mitch McConnell isn't worth anything. They're laughing. They're over there on the Republican side. Oh, I can't believe we had the Democrats who had every single advantage in these negotiations willingly gave up their advantage. But look, again, it's not because they're bad negotiators. No person is that stupid and that bad at politics. The only explanation is that they are paid to lose. They are paid to lose by their donors. They are paid to be weak. They are controlled opposition. Okay. Moving on. So Tony Perkins is one of those pro-family evangelical Christians. You hear a lot about those people. They're massively in favor of Donald Trump. In fact, Perkins himself, big fan of Trump. Now, he also runs the Family Research Council, which is one of those basically anti-LGBT, anti-abortion hate groups, right? They call themselves family groups. They love ripping families apart and love making sure that, again, if you're a gay family, for example, then you can't adopt kids. So, lovely people, right? Definitely in favor of the family. Now, I always thought it was a little strange that members of the Christian right would ally themselves with somebody who doesn't seem to be very Christian. I mean, for example, Donald Trump in his personal life, not to get too much into it, but he's had divorces, he's had affairs. Look, I don't really care about that stuff. I'm a progressive. I don't really judge people on that. I don't think that that's a moral argument against him. I'd rather definitely, go against him when it comes to fitness of office or policy concerns. But nonetheless, again, not my business. So recently it was alleged that Donald Trump had another affair. Again, who cares? It's not really getting all that much media attention, the affair itself, which is fine. Now, there's some things about the alleged affair which are interesting, like, for example, the $130,000 payoff. That's fascinating. Now, Stormy Daniels, back in 2011, detailed a 2006 affair in an interview with In Touch magazine. So we learned a lot of unsavory things that I don't want to really repeat about Trump and his, supposed affair. Okay. But the interesting thing is, allegations, since even though they've been around for a while, just weeks before the election, Daniels was allegedly paid off by Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen. Apparently, they didn't want this getting out. Okay, I could understand, right? If you're a Republican, you're obviously thrust into you're held to a higher moral standard. You should be held to a higher moral standing according to their own doctrine. Again, if you're somebody who's pro-family, moral, all that stuff, well, then that's what Republicans are supposedly looking for. I mean, I'm not a Republican voter. Maybe I'm completely wrong about this, but from what I could tell, Republicans tend to look to somebody with some sort of higher moral standing. They always say that liberals have no morals and we're ungodly and, all that stuff. And that's why we're not fit for office. So if you're going to go with somebody, then you would theoretically choose somebody that holds up to those ideals. Apparently, Donald Trump doesn't seem to do so. Or at least, when it comes to evangelical voters and their morality and things like that, you would expect that they would support somebody who is a paragon of morality. At least you would expect, right? In reality, they don't care because they're actually not moral people. Now, Tony Perkins basically admitted that in an interview with Politico, that he didn't actually care about any of that, and the evangelical voters don't actually care if there's anybody out there that shares their values that is in power. Let me show you. Here's a quote, right? Asked about how they could support Trump, knowing that he might have possibly had an affair with Stormy Daniels. He said, quote, "We kind of gave him, all right, you get a mulligan. You get a do-over here. So basically, allegedly cheat with your wife, and we don't care. Mulligan. Mulligan for you, do-over. What about getting divorced 3 times? You're not supposed to get divorced in the Bible, right? Mulligan, mulligan, mulligan. Constant lying. I mean, that's one of the things that you shouldn't be doing if you're a good Christian, right? You shouldn't lie to people. No, mulligan. Mulligan. So nothing but do-overs here from the evangelical right, and I'm going to explain why. But it is really interesting how they're just willing to let all this stuff go. So, I mean, could you imagine, right? A Democrat, for example, say a Democrat, is like, hey, oh, look, I ended up having an affair, right? Or the media finds out and reports, hey, Barack Obama had an affair with a mistress, with a porn star, how do you think the right would react? Immoral. God, we got to get this guy out of here. He's so immoral. He's tarnishing the office of the president. When it comes to Trump, what do we have? Basically silence. There's a bit of a double standard here, right? But see, they do that because this isn't about Christian values. Perkins actually explains what it's really about. He says, Perkins says that evangelical Christians are tired of being kicked around by Barack Obama and his leftists. I wish Barack Obama had surrounded himself with actual leftists. Wouldn't that be nice? Maybe we would have actually gotten some leftist policy, like Medicare for all or a higher minimum wage. Policy things that are actually super important. But no, Barack Obama was like, oh, $9 an hour minimum wage, $10 an hour minimum wage, maybe 12. I mean, maybe we should look at 12 at some point in the future. No, bitch, we need a living wage. We need it now. So, I wish he was as leftist as they said, as they claim that he is. But Perkins continues. He says, I think they're finally glad that there's somebody on the playground that is willing to punch the bully. Well, who's the bully? You're going to love this. Not Trump that's the bully, who started his campaign calling Mexicans and Muslims, Mexicans rapists and murderers, right? And, demagoguing against Muslims. That's how he started his campaign. And then, of course, he's had Twitter feuds, and he's called former, Lisa Machado, I believe that was her name, Miss Piggy and Miss Housekeeping. No, but that's not bullying behavior. Right. No. It's the leftists and Barack Obama. We're the bullies, the people that are actually fighting for LGBT folks, for equal rights. That's being a bully. That's bullying the Christian right. Supporting the rights for women to choose? No, that's bullying. Not only that, but you're a baby killer. I'm not sure he understands what bullying actually means. Look, what Perkins and evangelicals have been doing all this time has been denying people's basic civil rights based on sexual orientation. That's their big thing, right? We're going to focus on the family. We're the Family Research Council, and what we do is research on ways to hate gay people. That's what this is about. Look, they also believe that their right is trying to deny people the ability to believe in other gods. That's unconstitutional. So Isaac DeVore spoke to Perkins in this political interview, and he said, hey, man, look, you're talking about punching people in the face. I thought Jesus was about turning the other cheek. What about turning the other cheek? Perkins says, quote, you only have two cheeks. Instantly, my mind, the way that it goes, I thought of ass cheeks. But that's just me. He said, look, Christianity is not about being a welcome mat which people can just stomp their feet on. Look, here's the thing, right? In no way is Christianity being stomped on, right? Remember, most public office is being held by Christians. Christians are a majority of this country. Now, that does not mean we are a Christian nation. We're just a nation full of Christians, okay, with majority Christians. Yet this majority, some in this majority, the right-wing evangelicals, the so-called silent generation, that's what they call themselves, even though they're really fucking loud, they thrive on persecution, this persecution complex. Oh, the liberals are coming for us, the atheists are coming for us, the Muslims are coming for us, everybody's coming for us, right? Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. No, we're not coming for you. What's going on is that people who are generally oppressed by these religious groups are actually standing up and asserting their rights under the Constitution. Equal rights, okay? And look, not only that, but look, Christianity, yes, it is based in this victimhood complex, but the thing that Christianity teaches is that, hey, look, if you're meek, you will inherit the earth, right? So if you're good to people, if you're nice to people, if you render unto Caesar what's Caesar's, you should do all that stuff, right? You're not supposed to be violent, but of course, they don't get that memo. No, what's going on is Christians, they've had power in this country, and now some of them are upset that people, that people that traditionally didn't have that power are now getting some of that power, and they feel like they're left out. And you've got Perkins and the people who follow him that are desperately trying to hold on. And of course, they have invested in the single worst person, Donald Trump. This is a president that doesn't care about their values. Basically, he uses them for a voting block, and they're very, very loyal to him when he's not loyal to them at all. again, he's going to lie, cheat, and steal. He's a con man. And we've proven that over and over again. He's a con man that only cares about himself. But then again, you could say the same things about some of these televangelists and some of these so-called Christian right leaders, that they too lie, cheat, and steal and only care about themselves and their own power. So maybe they're more similar than I thought. Okay. Moving on. A Michigan man was recently arrested after allegedly threatening to kill CNN employees. Now, this was reported by a local station, WGCL-TV. Now, the FBI launched an investigation into the man, who was unnamed so far. Well, his name has come out. I'm actually not going to say his name because that might actually give him more undue attention. But he reportedly called CNN 22 times within the span of a week. So, according to court documents that were recently unsealed, a lot of these calls happen to be very threatening. Now, for one, and I'm going to say, I'm going to basically repeat what he said. He said, "Fake news, I'm coming to gun you all down." He later called again saying, "I'm smarter than you, more powerful than you. I have more guns than you, more manpower. Your caste is about to get gunned down in a matter of hours. It gets worse." He also said, "I'm coming to Georgia right now to go to the CNN headquarters to effing gun every single last one of you." Now, those are very clear threats. So now, thankfully, of course, the FBI agents, since this guy doesn't seem to be very smart, were able to track him down. They arrested him over the threats. And so, thankfully, he actually wasn't able to go and carry those threats out. Now, there's some question on whether or not he would be able to carry those out. His father had later said, look, the kid, he didn't know what he's doing. He didn't actually mean any of those threats. We didn't even own guns, right? But nonetheless, this is very, very serious. And look, based on the way that he was saying things, I think you know who inspired him. This is obviously a Trump-inspired person. Whether or not they're crazy, and they'll figure that out later if they, do a mental health screening or something on him to figure out his state of mind when he made this call or made these calls. But look, the overall point here is words have consequences, and I don't just mean the threats. Look, President Trump has called the press the enemy. Now, the thing is, you can't just go and call the press the enemy if they don't agree with you or if they give you unfavorable coverage. Because what happens when you start framing it in that way is that there is a certain percentage of people who will take that rhetoric and possibly turn it into violent action, or at least make threats. Now, thankfully, again, this guy didn't get a chance, but this is also what happens when you demagogue a group. In this case, reporters. In this case, the press. One of the things that Trump supporters had called the press? Lügenpresse. That is what Nazi Germany, people in Nazi Germany, actually called the press that was against the Nazi regime. Lügenpresse. And this has been heard at Trump rallies. They've been incredibly hostile to the press. Now, as for this guy, again, this isn't the first time that he's called being somewhat threatening. He earlier called the Islamic Center of Ann Arbor and made derogatory comments relating to Muslims. Now, who else has been making comments against Muslims? Oh, right, President Trump, who's wanted to ban them for the country, and actually has tried to push a Muslim ban that would, again, stop people who are Muslim from coming into the country. But see, look, speaking demagogue, right? Demagoguery, that's exactly what Trump is. I mean, and he's pushing all this fake news stuff as well. Now, that said, does CNN have a bias? Absolutely. Of course they have a bias. Does MSNBC have a bias? Of course. Does Fox News have a bias? Of course. All these different media outlets have a bias. I have a bias, right? But here's the thing, right? Do you guys believe that CNN goes in the back and makes stuff up in order to attack Trump? No. No. See, what CNN and a lot of these mainstream outlets have is a perspective, right? Their perspective is the establishment, right? So they live in a Washington bubble. They talk to all the rich people. They talk to the elite. That's why, for example, Bernie Sanders, they can't fathom why Bernie Sanders has any sort of popularity, why progressive policies have any sort of popularity. Because they go and they talk to their buddies, their rich investor friends that might be negatively impacted by higher tax rates. And they're like, no, Bernie Sanders, he could never win. No, because we don't like Bernie Sanders. Do you guys like Bernie Sanders? No, I don't like Bernie Sanders. So that's why places like the Washington Post will write 16 negative articles against Bernie Sanders in 16 hours. Is that a perspective? Yes. Is that a bias? Yes. Are they making up fake things in the back? No. Do they omit information? Of course. They do omit information. So, and of course, that goes to the perspective, that goes to shaping a narrative. Again, are they making up fake things? No. So that's a very important distinction. So I think unlike President Trump and a lot of the right wing, they at least operate inside of reality, even if their perspective and their bias is completely clear. But Trump's motivation in attacking the news, and this is different from when, say, I critique CNN or I critique MSNBC. It's not that he wants to make the media better. It's not that the right wants to change media so that it is better at informing people. No, it's to destroy media that they don't like. It's to destroy outlets that don't have favorable coverage of you. And they hate that. He's going to tell you that you're fake news, that you can't trust them at all. He's going to tell you that they're the enemies of America. And look, when you have that kind of rhetoric, you can't be surprised when someone calls certain outlets or targets certain journalists with either threats or actual violence. Because you have the president of the United States out there saying that that's okay. They are our enemy. Go after them. So, look, we need to do something. I don't know what to do about this. Just hold Trump accountable on what he says. And that's, I mean, what do you do from there? You have to make sure that people have their ability to have free speech. And you can't just shut people down. But also, I guess you need to be able to protect people from threats as well. So, because threats are never okay. Okay. Moving on. Okay. So recently the FBI arrested somebody for sending violent threats to CNN. You know, he called them fake news, and he threatened to come to their headquarters and gun down every last one of them, right? So, again, the FBI, they arrested him, and he's actually been released on a $10,000 bail. So during this entire thing, you might not have heard about it. Wonder why? Well, okay, well, let's go to what the president was doing. Let's ask what he was doing when this entire thing was going on. Because, look, at least an attempted shooting at CNN, you would think that it would catch the attention of the president. You would think that it would catch the attention of other people. Because, again, this was somebody I think was making terroristic threats. They were threatening terrorism against a political opponent. So where was the president? Well, he was on Twitter, and he was gloating about the end of the government shutdown. Now, look, hey, do I blame him for that? No. He actually did get a win because the Democrats were too weak to hold their position. So, yes, they handed Donald Trump a victory, and of course he's going to basically spike the ball, spike the football. Now, on Twitter he said, even crazy Jim Acosta, fake news CNN agrees. Trump world and White House sources dancing in end zone. Trump wins again. Schumer and Dems cave, gambled and lost. Thank you for your honesty, Jim. All right. Hey, look, that's fair. Again, you want to spike the football? I think you've earned it. And Democrats should be ashamed of actually giving up this possible victory, right? To giving the advantage to the Republicans after they had the advantage on this shutdown fight. But anyway, to get to the bigger issue, Donald Trump's supposed to keep us safe, right? Well, that is unless you're a Latino, Muslim, Black, liberal, or a member of the media. If you're a member of any of those groups, well then, by Donald Trump's own admission, you are the enemy. You're the enemy of the American people. So he's not going to respond to this, right? Just like he's not going to respond to white supremacists who also committed actual acts of violence. In fact, the Justice Department quietly sentenced or prosecuted somebody who actually did violent acts. But since they were white supremacists, they can't say anything about it because a lot of Donald Trump's base happens to also be white supremacists. I mean, these are the people that support him. These are the people that listen to him. These are the people that think that the media, look, media that doesn't like him, well, they're all fake news. Okay? Even when they know that it's not fake, they still call it fake news. In fact, look, when it comes down to it, Trump supporters are actually the biggest consumers of fake news. There's a study that came out at the end of last year that found that fake news skewed almost entirely pro-Trump and was consumed more voraciously by the most politically conservative Americans and Americans over 60. And look, by fake news, let me give you the definition here. Researchers of the study define fake news as, quote, factually dubious for-profit articles. So it doesn't mean it's stuff that's geared against liberals. That's not fake news. Yes, sometimes there are actual, legitimate, I guess, arguments against liberals that people will use that are based in, I guess, policy differences. And we could disagree on that, but you're not making things up. But fake news, again, is defined as it's false on purpose for the entire purpose of generating clicks. So, and those clicks, of course, get ad revenue. So this is about creating fake news that goes viral in right-wing circles in order to make a buck. Pizzagate's a great example, right? Now, this is something that got picked up by right-wing conspiracy blogs, right? There was no facts. Somebody just made it up, and they spread it around. Next thing you know, you had Alex Jones ranting about pedophile pizza places, and then after a guy went into one of these pizza places, after harassing the owners, ended up shooting the place up with a gun. Look, he was there. He's like, I believed it. I believed it. I was looking for the children. I was there to rescue the poor kids. There were no children there. There was no basement. There was no pedophile gate. There's nothing like that, okay? There was nothing in that pizza place. So, and of course, afterwards, after they found out that it's not true and that they actually endangered people's lives, what did Alex Jones do? Quietly backpedal. What did most of the right-wing outlets do? Quietly backpedal. Come on. Look, that's the real impact of fake news, okay? And these threats are what happen when deranged people listen to other deranged people and get convinced that the people who don't agree with you are your enemy. This is why we're so polarized, right? And again, Donald Trump, he's a voracious consumer of fake news. He fits the profile. Again, he's over 60. He's very conservative. Watches Fox and Friends. Is talked to Alex Jones. He is a consumer of fake news. So if you think he's going to change, absolutely not. Okay. move on. Something different than fake news. Actually, that is a good story. Let's go to that one. So it looks like the relationship between White House Chief of Staff John Kelly and President Trump is deteriorating. Now, this is according to a new report from Gabriel Sherman, right? Writing for Vanity Fair. Now, he cited two prominent Republicans in frequent contact with the White House and reported that Trump is starting to really get annoyed with John Kelly in the way that he basically portrays himself as the adult in the room. Now, if there's anything that Donald Trump can't stand, is somebody else being portrayed as the adult in the room and him as being managed by someone else. Now, he actually believes that that undercuts him, right? So he believes that John Kelly has undercut him. Now, there's a recent example of where John Kelly, during an interview, said that, well, Trump was uninformed when it came to the wall. Now, that's something that both John Kelly and Donald Trump agree in. They both want the wall. They're both very big hardliners on immigration. But when he said that Trump is, again, uninformed when it comes to the wall on experts, he came out with a bunch of blistering tweets. It's like, the wall's the wall. The wall's the wall. I knew it. I knew everything about the wall. I came up with it. It was my fantastic idea. So basically he did that in a way to push back against that idea that he was uninformed about this issue, which he absolutely is, because, again, he believes that it's just supposed to be one giant continuous wall, which is, again, not workable when it comes to the southern border. There are rivers, and he just found out about this. It's like raging, vicious rivers, big mountains. I knew that the whole time. No, you didn't, you jackass. You didn't know anything about that. It's amazing, right? But anyway, so Donald Trump feels undercut, right? But despite that, Kelly, according to these Republicans, isn't quite leaving yet. Again, he feels this duty to the country, according to these Republicans, and not to Trump, to watch over him, make sure he doesn't do something stupid. And apparently also he has this personal goal to outlast Reince Priebus. And also, since he still agrees with the administration and what they're actually doing, he doesn't want to make bad press and say that they have a high turnover rate. So that's interesting. Now, Priebus, of course, resigned from his position about 6 months into the administration. The next day, John Kelly was announced as his replacement. Interesting. Now, look, their relationship, they started out with mutual respect because they agree on so much, but since then, it's gotten bad. Things have went downhill. Previously, it was reported that Kelly often threatened to quit his position if Trump and others didn't listen to him. So that was him using his leverage. Again, since Donald Trump had a respect for him, because he's such a strong character, such a strong personality, he's like, oh man, I don't want John Kelly to leave. It's the order, right? He's a strong character. I like being around this strong guy. He's a great guy. So that was his leverage. Apparently he doesn't use that very much anymore. Now, the other thing that, of course, Kelly and Trump agreed with, is, as I mentioned before, was immigration. And actually, Kelly was against doing an immigration deal with the Democrats that included DACA. Now, in the end, it didn't really matter all that much because the Democrats folded like a cheap suit. But nonetheless, that is one of the people, along with Stephen Miller, that were making it pretty impossible for the Democrats and Republicans to actually come together to do something about both immigration and the Dreamers. So, despite those similarities and despite that mutual respect, well, basically their relationship is now being overshadowed by Donald Trump's ego. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mentioned it earlier. He can't stand to be overshadowed by someone else. He can't stand to the illusion of being managed. That's why earlier it was called Bannon territory. Now, the media reported on that same perception, with Steve Bannon being the guy that's in charge, managing Trump and pulling the strings behind the scenes. And again, he doesn't like that. What did Trump do? Trump got rid of him. So now Kelly has a similar perception, and that's not a good thing. In fact, according to Vanity Fair, Kelly's role as taskmaster appears to have undermined his standing with the president. The more Kelly plays up that he's being the adult in the room, that is basically combat duty and that he's serving the country, that kind of thing drives Trump nuts, Vanity Fair reported, citing a Republican close to the White House. According to other Republicans, that's exactly his reaction. He said to a friend, according to a Republican familiar with this conversation, quote, "I've got another nut job here who thinks he's running things." So understand that. He's referring to John Kelly. That nut job. Thinks he's running the White House. Thinks he's the adult in the room, that I'm uninformed. I'm not uninformed. I'm the most important person that you will ever meet. I'm more informed than anybody here. Here it comes. Here it comes. So, look, earlier I said Bannon territory, right? And it actually might be worse. Now, one of the sources added that Kelly isn't just in Bannon territory, but he is now approaching Attorney General Jeff Sessions territory. A man whom Trump has reportedly said he's angrier with than special counsel Robert Mueller. Wow. This could be like Sessions, the source told the magazine. A reference to Trump's frustration that he can't fire his attorney general. Because that would be very, very bad. So, oh boy. Now, you guys remember, for a while, Donald Trump was actually bullying his, Sessions into resigning, into quitting. Yeah. Since he couldn't fire him. Well, but I'm sure he's trying to figure out ways to be able to fire him and to fire Robert Mueller and to fire everybody else. So, not a good sign. So now there's one more component to this story, which I think is fun. Sherman, writing for Vanity Fair, also said that Ivanka Trump is now looking for Kelly's replacement. According to Raw Story, Ivanka is the most worried about it. She's trying to figure out who replaces Kelly. Someone who has spoken with the president's daughter told Sherman. Now, here's the thing, right? So who does replace Kelly if he leaves? Number one, who's going to be dumb enough to take the job? I mean, look, you have to have, it's pretty obvious you have to have somebody who won't overshadow the president. Now, for a while, John Kelly was actually doing a pretty good job of that. But then, apparently, he goes in the talk shows and he says certain things, and oh, look at that. Now he's overshadowing the president. Now he's getting more press. And more importantly, he's getting the perception that he's a manager. So you can't do that if you're in Trump world. You can't make it seem like you are in control of him, that you are keeping him from his worst impulses. Even if that's exactly what you're doing, the perception alone is going to get you removed, right? So his chief of staff is likely got to be somebody, again, who can be low-key, but who will also lie for him and also agree with him on many issues. It's a tough order. So I don't know if they're going to be able to find somebody like that. But the world is full of opportunists. So we'll see if that happens. We'll see if somebody can take the job. But I think the minute that you hear John Kelly is stepping down, and I think that is getting to be a very likely outcome, that means that Ivanka's job in finding somebody was successful. We'll see. Okay. Let's see. All right. Let me go to Trump's drug policy guy. It's probably my favorite story of the day. So President Trump claimed that he would surround himself with some of the best people, right? The best workers, the best minds, even though he has totally the best mind. And he's a very stable genius, is what I hear. Also, he can get the work of making America great again. Well, one of his hires has drawn a lot of scrutiny, and believe me when I say that that's actually really hard to do. And you're going to see why. Now, the main question is Taylor Wayaneth, right? Now, Taylor Wayaneth, when you look at his resumes, is actually quite impressive, considering the fact that he is 23 years old. Wow. He's actually one of the youngest appointees to the administration, and has somehow ended up in a top position in the White House's drug policy office. Now, boy, to be elevated that far, that must mean that he's a really super talented guy. I mean, getting a top position in the White House at that age, that's super, super impressive, right? So he must have great qualifications, right? Well, let's take a look. Now, while in college, late in 2014 and early 2015, Taylor Wayaneth began working as a legal assistant at the New York firm O'Dwyer and Bernstein. Okay, well, I don't know anything about O'Dwyer and Bernstein. I'm assuming that that's somewhat prestigious, right? Now, in a resume initially submitted to the government, Wayaneth said he worked at the firm until April of 2016. So he'd worked at that firm for quite some time. Now, following his graduation in May of 2016, Wayaneth served as a paid member of Trump's presidential campaign and then as a volunteer with the transition team, arranging housing for senior administration officials. He had worked closely with Rick Dearborn, now White House Deputy Chief of Staff. Now, okay. So apparently he worked as a legal assistant for several years, and then worked in the Trump transition, right? So his experience is actually a little light, but that's something that you would expect out of a 23-year-old, right? So his experience, again, working for the Trump campaign, but yet he's in charge of the ONDCP, and that's the agency that's actually supposed to create drug policy. So, yes, very, very light on qualifications. That in itself is somewhat concerning for something that should be very, very important, especially considering that we're facing an opioid crisis. But that wasn't the only problem, his lack of experience when it comes to this appointee. Apparently, on his resume, he made a few errors. Let me go through those. Now, according to the New York Times, on his resumes, Wayaneth revised dates relating to job assignments, and he cut the number of hours he claimed he had volunteered at a monastery in Queens while at St. John's. Now, wait a minute here. So, look, again, on his resume, he claimed that he volunteered about a total of 275 hours at a monastery. Huh. But his second revision, cut it from 275 to just 150. So, that's interesting. Now, when people noticed that, they began to ask questions. So he's like, I'm going to have to revise my resume again. It turns out that whole 150 thing, not exactly correct. Turns out, I didn't actually volunteer at all at a monastery. A third resume provided by the White House does not mention any volunteer work at the monastery. 275, oops. 150, not quite right. 0. Yeah, now we're there. That's not the worst part, right? There are also actually some questions about his work as a legal assistant while he was in college. Now, when an FBI official called as part of a mandatory background check in January 2017, the firm said that Wayaneth had actually left 8 months earlier than his resume indicated. Now, you're not gonna believe the reason, right? Now, O'Dwyer said that he hired Wayaneth in part because both men were involved in the same fraternity, and that the firm invested time in training him for what was expected to be a long relationship. Instead, he said that Wayaneth decided he just wasn't going to show up. But show up? Like, what? To work? That's exactly what he means. Like, yeah, you know what? I just don't feel like going to work. Now imagine, like, could you just not show up at work and then suddenly get an appointment to the White House? I don't think that's what happens, but if you're in the Trump orbit, if you work for the Trump White House, that's exactly what happens. I mean, again, how do you not show up for work and end up in the Trump administration? I don't know. That's amazing. Now, there's one more thing, right, that they questioned. And that's, of course, his education. Now, one of his resumes said that he had a master's degree from Fordham University. Well, that's very impressive, right? Of course. I mean, look, you're thinking, surely he wouldn't lie about his education, right? No, of course he wouldn't. According to a university official who talked to the Post, Wayaneth, while actually going to Fordham University, yes, he didn't lie about that, but apparently he hasn't even finished his coursework. The balls on this guy. Not only did he not show up to work, but he at his previous job and claimed to be there longer than he was actually there. He also lied about volunteering at a monastery. And to top it all off, he never finished his degree, while claiming to have a master's degree. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have found the perfect addition to the Trump administration. Look, you think that disqualifies him from this current administration? No, that actually makes him more qualified. Amazing. He's almost as brazen of a liar as Donald Trump. I'm surprised that they're actually removing him from that position at all. In fact, according to the Times, an administration official on January 12th said that Wayaneth will return to the position he initially held at the agency. So no longer would he be actually in charge. He would actually be a White House liaison. Still an important position, still an influential position, and still one that he totally does not deserve. Now, the official said that Wayaneth had been primarily performing administrative work rather than making policy decisions. Well, thank God on that. And that he had assumed additional duties and an additional title following staff openings. Now, that's also really important. So it was also reported that 11 people who were in the drug policy agency, right, had quit. They resigned. Well, why would they do that? Well, it turns out that it's because of President Trump's proposed budget. They actually want to cut the funding for this agency by 95%. Again, this is the office that is actually there to try and do something about the opioid crisis, right? The opioid crisis that is killing thousands of Americans right now, all over the country. That's an epidemic. It's an epidemic. And yet, the Trump administration is like, yeah, let's cut the budget by 95%. They're not actually doing anything about the crisis. They don't actually care. Look, I feel bad for anybody who actually believed that Donald Trump is going to do anything. And again, it makes me go back and think about the CNN guy, right? Or the guy on CNN who, his son died from opioid overdose, and he would go around and he'd sing songs about Trump, and he tried to get him elected at all these different, Trump rallies. He'd play his guitar. And later on, when he realized that Trump wasn't actually going to do anything about the opioid crisis, he's like, I was wrong. I put away my guitar for good. And he's like, I feel cheated and betrayed. And that's exactly what's going on here. He does not care about any of this stuff. He does not care about the people who are suffering, the people who are dying. And it shows with not only who he puts in charge of his agencies, but how much he gives, how much funding he actually gives them or doesn't. Sad. All right, let me do one more story for you guys. Hopefully it'll be quick. Now, in a move that is likely to hurt jobs in the United States, President Trump has approved tariffs on imported solar cells, right? Now, the protective tariffs on both kinds of imports, it's reported by The Hill, would initially kick in at a higher rate in the first year and would decrease by 5% every year. So for the first year, it'd actually be a 30% tariff that would be applied to imported solar modules and cells. Now, this is billed as protecting American workers, right? Now, look, hey, man, look, we're going to protect American jobs and we're going to protect our American manufacturers in solar. Well, here's the thing. Right now, American solar manufacturing is lagging way behind the United States. And yes, I understand a lot of it is because of cheaper manufacturing in China, but the tariff is kind of the bad way to go, right? So, according to Reuters, only 14% of the solar industry's 260,000 jobs are in manufacturing. So think about that, right? So this is there to help. This was billed as something to help solar manufacturers. And yet only 14% of the solar workforce is in manufacturing. Again, that's a larger problem and a longer, in a bigger problem, right? But most of the jobs, if 14% are in manufacturing, then the rest of the jobs are actually in installation, right? So what happens when you put a tariff on imported solar panels that are made primarily in other countries is that you're going to end up impacting the people who install these solar panels, which is one of the biggest jobs in the industry in the United States. So overall, this is going to have a negative impact on the solar industry. So congratulations, you've actually hurt the industry that you said you were going to protect. Now, the thing is the solar industry is actually one of the biggest, fastest growing industries in America. They employ, again, 260,000 jobs, right? Look, man, that's a lot of people. That's actually more than coal, right? That's twice as many people as coal that are being employed by the solar industry. Now, this decision, it's going to hurt job growth, like I said. In fact, according to the Solar Energy Industries Association, which is a trade group, they said the tariffs would lead to 23,000 job losses this year alone in both the solar installation and manufacturing sectors. Because, and think about it this way, this isn't even considering what China is going to do in response. So, but look, here's the thing. Hurting the solar industry, I think that was the whole point. Donald Trump and Republican politicians, most of them don't actually care about solar energy. No, what they do is that since they're paid mostly by oil and gas interests and coal, well, they represent oil, gas, and coal, fossil fuels, right? So, and they're going to, like, most of this administration has gone to propping up those fossil fuels, especially coal. In fact, Energy Secretary Rick Perry had proposed a way to prop up the coal and nuclear industry back in September. Now, the proposal would have required certain grid operators to pay power producers for their costs, plus a reasonable profit, if the power plant at issue has at least 90 days of fuel on site. That is a standard that only coal and nuclear meet. Now, fortunately, the 5-person commission, 4 of them actually appointed by Donald Trump, rejected that idea. They're like, no, you can't do that. Like, that's a ridiculous standard. Now, Perry and other supporters of the proposal, according to The Hill, failed to show that current electricity markets are not just or reasonable, findings that would be necessary in order to mandate the higher electricity payments that Perry had sought. Now, in addition to propping up coal and nuclear power, this would also end up raising electricity costs, possibly by as much as $11.8 billion, according to a forecast by consulting firm Energy Innovation. But see, that's their agenda, though. Prop up coal, focus on oil and gas, and do anything they can to kill renewable energy. These tariffs that are disguised as protecting American workers are actually going to hurt American workers. So, look, I don't see, yes, I see what they were trying to do. So, and I don't see how they can hide the fact of what they're doing. Look, instead of tariffs on solar energy panels, maybe we should subsidize them more here. The reason that it's so cheap over in China is because of massive government investment, massive government subsidies. We don't do that here. Instead, we give all of our subsidies to oil and gas. Look, I know it seems, I guess, a little ironic that here I am, somebody who's generally against corporate welfare and corporate subsidies, saying, hey, maybe we should give some subsidies to solar energy. But there's a reason, right? In our case, we need massive investment into alternative energies if we're going to head off climate change. And if we're going to ensure more American jobs in the solar industry, and look, you know, people that go from, for example, the coal mines could have cleaner jobs that don't give them black lung in the solar power industry, installing solar panels, or in some cases, actually being able to manufacture those solar panels. So when you think about it, yes, a little bit of corporate subsidies and welfare into this system, into actually creating a green energy revolution is kind of what we actually need. Not, in this case, not protective tariffs. This is not going to save any jobs. This is going to kill jobs, and it's actually going to set us back on alternative energy even further. And I'm going to stress again, that's by design. This was the point. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. We've got videos going up pretty much every day during the week. So subscribe for more if you missed anything, if you want to see more content. All right. Thanks to the patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. If you want to support our show, keep us independent and non-corporate sponsored, that's a way that you can do it. Also, you can use YouTube Super Chat as well. And I now not only will, you know, read your comments, but also that helps the show. So that's another way that you can help TYT Nation. All right. Thanks, everybody. Love you guys. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. Join me tomorrow when Ron Placone joins me for the first segment. All right. We'll see you then.